Good morning. Thank God it's Friday. As you can see, I'm so excited. Today is Friday, the last working day in the week of January 25. Not actually the last Friday, but the last working day, the week of this week. And of course, today is 23rd January 2026. My name is Winifred Ugwebo, your host on the program. We are looking at what the national papers are saying on today's show inside Nigeria. Of course, like we normally do, we'll flag off with Nigeria's foremost Friday newspaper, Leadership Friday. So let's go there. Kumi Wale abduction, abductees location identified. ACF says amnesty for bandits won't work. Discussions ongoing for victims release. Religious leader. Kicker to that leading story is a developing story. Actually, after the denial came the confirmation that over 177 persons were actually kidnapped in Kumi Wale in Kaduna State. Abductees location identified. ACF says amnesty for bandits won't work. However, I hope the Katsina State governor is hearing this because he wants to release 70 bandits from jail. Religious leader says discussions ongoing for victims released. A kicker to that leading story on Leadership Friday. Today, January 23, 2026. We move ahead to other stories gracing the cover of today's paper. E-registration, we've reserved 001 slot for Governor Yusuf, says Kano APC. We are all waiting with bated breath for the newest defection coming from Kano State, which is Governor Abba Yusuf. 35 million Nigerians risk hunger. United Nations wants. The story is on page 4 of Leadership Friday. Federal government disburses 152 billion naira to contractors amid Abuja protest. It was a developing story yesterday. And of course, it was also a news item on Leadership Television. Federal government disburses 152 billion naira to contractors amid Abuja protest. EFCC uncovers over 18.7 billion naira investment scam. And that story is on page 10 of Leadership Friday. Just beneath the masthead of Leadership Friday, for defying the Boko Haram insurgency and for continuing to offer health services to its victims for over 21 years, Mrs. Mebe Ijoma Duaka is primary healthcare worker model of the year 2025. Congratulations to her. For transforming grassroots healthcare and offering over 2,600 free surgeries nationwide, among other initiatives, Dr. Sheidu Adebayo Bello is primary healthcare model of the year 2025. Congratulations to you both. Of course, leadership conference and award ceremony is coming later in February this year. Lastly, on the cover of Leadership Friday, how Coach Chell orchestrated Super Eagles penalty takers at AFCON 2025. Of course, it's no longer news that those penalty takers actually missed out on those penalties, which cost us the ticket to finals of that AFCON 2025. The story runs on page 30 of Leadership. How Coach Chell orchestrated Super Eagles penalty takers at AFCON 2025. Of course, we want to find out what took place. From there, we move to page 3 of Leadership, where we have our stand. Today's stand is on Imam Abubakar, when courage defies division. You remember the Imam Abdullahi Abubakar, who actually, let's take some excerpts. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag in case you're wondering who is Imam Abubakar, when courage defies division, to whom's memory this our stand today is written about. It said Imam Abdullahi Abubakar died last week at 92, and Nigeria lost something can scarcely afford to lose, proof that our better angels still exist. On June 23, 2018, when armed attackers descended on communities in Bakin-Ladi local government area of Plateau State, the chief imam of Nga village made a choice that should have been unremarkable, but turned out to be extraordinary. He opened his mosque and home to over 300 Christians fleeing the violence. When the attackers demanded he hand them over, he refused. I did it because we are all human beings, he said later. My religion teaches me to protect lives regardless of faith. That single act, born not from calculation but conviction, earned him national honors, international recognition, and something far more valuable, the genuine gratitude of people whose lives he saved at serious risk to his own. The federal government gave him the national honor of Member of the Order of the Niger. This newspaper named him Joint Person of the Year alongside Aliko Dangote in 2018. The United States presented him with his International Religious Freedom Award in 2019. President Bola Tinubu mourned him this week as an extraordinary religious leader whose lifetime represented a striking testament to faith, courage, and a staunch belief in the sacredness of human life. In our stand, Imam Abdullahi Abubakar proved that another Nigeria is possible, where your faith compels you to save your neighbor, even when it's dangerous, even when no one is watching, even when your neighbor doesn't share your beliefs. He didn't do it for awards or recognition. He did it because failing to do it would have violated everything he claimed to believe. That is his standard. That's what Nigerian religious, community, and political leaders should be judged by. We buried Imam Abubakar immediately after Jumat prayers in Nga village last week. The question now is whether we bury his example with him or finally decide to live up to it. What an editorial. May his soul rest in peace. Imam Abubakar. From our stand, we take a brisk walk to the back page of Leadership Friday, where we have conversation with Azu. And today's conversation is on we owe Putin an unreserved apology. Of course, you have to find out in this conversation why we owe Putin, the Russian leader, an unreserved apology. Let's take some quotes from that conversation. Putin's first year in office must be making Putin wonder what he has done to be classified among the world's most despised, with descriptions of him ranging from a tyrant and outlaw to a potential war criminal. If the price for world peace is to award President Trump a Nobel Peace Prize for ending hate wars, a delusion he firmly believes, then we should indulge his fantasy by granting this fervent wish. But since it would be grossly unfair to exclude Putin or to ignore Xi Jinping, Kim, or even Benjamin Netanyahu from such a list, it would not be a bad idea to propose to the Norwegian Nobel Committee a once-in-a-lifetime first and last Nobel Peace Prize, Quintet 2026 or 5. Quote from today's conversation with Azu Isiekwenem. Before we leave the back page, let's visit Ghana Must Go. On the news, Labour Party crisis called sacks Aburi, and the news Ghana Must Go is asking, is Apapa aware? Apapa is also, Lamidi Apapa is also a factional leader of Labour Party. Is he aware? Over to you, Lamidi Apapa, as we conclude on review of Leadership newspaper this Friday. For more, log into the website of Leadership newspaper. We move ahead to the next paper we have on our lineup, still on abduction story. Of course, Vanguard is blazing with it as its headline story. Kaduna abductions, U.S. raises fresh concerns, tags federal government on stronger action. Kaduna abductions, U.S. raises fresh concerns, tags federal government on stronger action. We take the kickers beneath the leading story. It says we're intensifying military operations in affected areas, federal government. SMBLF demands immediate rescue of victims. This is the 23rd attack on our community villager. Rescue worshippers apprehend kidnappers, Speaker Abbas tax security agencies. Sokapu condemns abduction, calls for urgent government action. Southern Kaduna Christian leaders declare 2-day fasting for victims' safe return. Governor Sani says, I'm personally monitoring operations. Kickers to the leading story on Kaduna abductions today on Vanguard newspaper. U.S. raises fresh concerns, tax federal government on stronger action. Akpabio Natasha resumed legal battle as Senate President appeals. And in sport, AFCON 2027, Super Eagles begin qualifying campaign September. Kudirat Abiola's murder, Supreme Court dismisses case against Major Mustafa. 2027, Saraki calls for credible polls, effective fight against graft. I'm comfortable in PDP, Makinde declares after meeting Tinubu. Let's wait and see, because the governors that have been defecting, that was their slogan initially until they were won over. And that also concludes review of front headline stories on Vanguard newspaper this Friday. For more, log into the website of Vanguard. We move ahead to the next paper we have on our menu with a different main cover story, and that is This Day. This Day says Rivers CJ, my hand is fettered, stops impeachment process against Fubara Odu, says he's restrained by interim orders of State High Court and appeal process by the legislators. We are going to take some excerpts from this leading story, which is also our cover story for today's Inside Nigeria. It says political disagreements between the executive and legislature in Rivers State assumed a new twist yesterday as Chief Judge of the state, Justice Simeon Chibuzo Amadi, declined a request by the House of Assembly to constitute a 7-man impeachment panel to investigate alleged gross misconduct leveled against Governor Simin Alaye Fubara and his deputy, Professor Ngozi Odu. In a letter personally signed by Chibuzo Amadi, dated January 20, 2026, and addressed to Speaker of the Assembly, Martins Amewule, the CJ stated that he was a defendant in the suit separately filed by Fubara and his deputy before a high court in the state. The Chief Judge acknowledged receiving the Assembly's resolution to set up the 7-man impeachment panel to probe the governor, but said he was restrained by a subsisting High Court order from. The story continues on page 8 of the paper. He said he was constrained by a substituting court order taking any further action. The Amewule-led assembly had on January 16 asked the chief judge to set up a 7-man panel to investigate allegations against Fubara and Odu. The lawmakers insisted that they were not going back on the impeachment process against Fubara and his deputy, even after 4 of their colleagues backed down and pleaded understanding in the collective interest. In the letter addressed to the chief judge signed by the speaker, the lawmakers stated that their action was in compliance with section 1884 of the 1999 Constitution. However, at a press briefing in Port Harcourt, members of the Assembly reaffirmed their resolve to continue with the impeachment, stressing that the process is the most viable constitutional option to resolve the lingering political impasse in the state. While the lawmakers waited for the chief judge to set up the probe panel, the governor and his deputy separately filed suits at a Rivers State High Court in Oyingbo local government area, seeking interim order of injunction, barring the speaker and other lawmakers, clerk of the assembly, and chief judge of Rivers State from going further with the impeachment process. The court restrained the speaker and other lawmakers who were defendants in this suit from sending any request, resolution, articles of impeachment, or other documents or communication to the chief judge. The court also restrained the chief judge from receiving, forwarding, considering, and or however acting on any request, resolution, articles of impeachment, or other documents or communication from 1 to 27 defendants for the purposes of constituting a panel to investigate the purported allegations of misconduct against the governor and his deputy for 7 days. The court further directed that the interim order, the originating processes in the suits, be served on the 32 defendants, as well as the chief judge through any staff of the judiciary at the chief judge's chambers within the High Court premises, and adjourned the case to January 23, 2026. Thus, in his response, Chibuzo Amadi told the speaker that he was legally restrained from acting on his request due to interim orders issued by the State High Court. He further disclosed that the speaker had lodged an appeal against the interim orders at the Court of Appeal Port Harcourt Division, adding that notices of appeal were served on his office on January 19 and 20. We just took some excerpts from our leading story today on Inside Nigeria. Rivers CJ, my hand is fettered, stops impeachment process against Fubara Odu. Leading story on all the papers we have on our lineup this Friday. Of course, it's a developing story. The crisis in Rivers State assumed another high level, decibel of level, with the House of Assembly instituting or ordering the CJ, the Chief Judge of the state, to set up a panel, impeachment panel against the governor and his deputy. We move ahead to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is the Daily Times. Daily Times also has the same leading story like that of this day newspaper. It says impeachment plot. Justice Amadi rejects Rivers Assembly's request to probe Fubara. Impeachment plot. Justice Amadi rejects Rivers Assembly's request to probe Fubara. Same leading story with that of leadership and even that of Daily Sun on our paper, on our lineup today. However, we'll continue with the other leading stories on today's This Day newspaper. Tinubu unveils incentives to unlock jobs, forest inflows from shares Bonga Southwest orders. Says project will be delivered before May 2027. Ojulari reveals share ready to make $20 billion additional investment. Ojulari is the group managing director of NNPCL. Ojulari reveals share ready to make $20 billion additional investment. In Davos, Edun pitches productivity-led investments to drive jobs exports. These are kickers to the stories about the masthead of this day, this Friday. Tinubu unveils incentives to unlock jobs, forest inflows from shares Bonga Southwest orders. U.S. Under Secretary, Nigerian government must do more to protect Christians. Another leading story on the papers we have on our lineup today. U.S. Under Secretary, Nigerian government must do more to protect Christians. That story continues on page 8 of This Day. Lastly, on the cover of This Day newspaper, Tinubu approves posting of 3 out of 68 ambassadors designate. That story continues on page 9 of This Day newspaper. Tinubu approves posting of 3 out of 68 ambassadors designate. And that also concludes the review of underline stories on This Day newspaper this Friday. For more, log into the website of This Day. We move to the next paper, and incidentally, the last paper we have on our lineup this Friday, and that is The Guardian. The Guardian's leading story, big story actually, it continues on pages 4 and 5. How poor services, high cost, easy drug access, fuel addiction crisis. How poor services, high cost, easy drug access, fuel addiction crisis. It's a big story that runs on pages 4 and 5 of the paper. Christian leaders declare fasting prayer over Kajuru abduction. Ekiti 2026, political parties to pay 60 million naira campaign advert fees. Court proscribes industrial action as Wike sues FCTA workers. Court proscribes industrial action as Wike sues FCTA workers. The FCTA workers has been on strike ever since over poor working conditions. Court proscribes industrial action as Wike sues FCTA workers. Rivers CJ declines to constitute pro panel against Fubara. Government pledges full security as UN says 35 million Nigerians at hunger risk. Federal government reiterates religious freedom as report cites 72% of global Christian killings in Nigeria. Federal government reiterates religious freedom as report cites 72% of global Christian killings in Nigeria. That story continues on page 6 of The Guardian newspaper. That takes us to the stories just beneath the masthead of The Guardian. Federal government warns against consumer extortion, orders free installation of 500,000 meters. CSO knocks National Assembly on prolonged recess, warns Electoral Act delay threatens 2027 poll. CSO knocks National Assembly on prolonged recess, warns Electoral Act delay threatens 2027 poll. ADC affirms Obi, Usman, and strong coalition members. And that also concludes the review of front headline stories on The Guardian this Friday. For more, log into the website of The Guardian, www.guardian.ng. Well, viewers, on this note, we conclude today and this week's edition of Inside Nigeria, where we looked at newspaper review, what the papers are saying, including Nigeria's most influential newspaper, Leadership. Don't forget to log into our website and to follow us on all our social media handles for more news. My name is Winifred Gbebo. Here's wishing you a beautiful week ahead. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for watching. For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast.